Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Future Seeds podcast. I'm your host, Cyprian, and in this show, I explore groundbreaking solutions to our world's unique problems by connecting seemingly unrelated fields such as technology, ecology, community, and spirituality. In this episode, I interview Shadé Zahrai. Shadé is a former lawyer who also holds degrees in psychology, business, and leadership coaching. Her accomplishments are massive. She was twice a finalist for the Telstra Women in Business Awards. She's a TED and TEDx presenter and was featured in the New York Times, Yahoo Finance, Forbes, Vice, and many more. She's known for her supernatural abilities to translate neuroscience and psychology research into practical, actionable strategies to accelerate success. In the previous episode, we explored the PERMA Model, a model for happiness designed by Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. And we also spoke about the 5 inner critics that hold us back and keep us from thriving. In this episode, Shadé gives us her antidote to our inner critics, how to consciously break vicious mental cycles and change our thoughts. We also discuss many other topics such as compassion, fear, purpose and meaning, money, and work-life balance. This is Future Seeds, planting a different narrative into the soil of our minds, one podcast at a time.
This process comes from a bit of a combination of a bunch of different things: cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of psychopathology, therapies in terms of working through it. It's very basic. So the first thing to be aware of is you cannot instantly replace a negative thought. You won't be able to, in the moment, just replace it. It doesn't work. It's like trying to squish a balloon into a tiny little, a jar. It's going to then just come out at a really inconvenient time. So the first thing is you want to have the awareness, but conscious awareness. The first question is, what is this inner critic saying to me right now? What are they saying to me? What is the narrative that they are trying to push? And importantly, how do I feel physiologically when I listen to that inner critic? And the importance of this part where we say, how do I feel physiologically? We're bringing attention back to the conscious mind, which is your prefrontal cortex. And you're actually bringing attention to your physical sensations. Because often we get so caught up in our heads that we forget we have a body attached, So this just brings you to the physical sensations, which in the moment can actually give you a little bit of emotional space between the trigger, of that inner critic and how you're actually feeling. But importantly, what is it trying to push? Because identification and awareness are really very important places to start. When you're listening for these voices, it's also very important to dissociate from them in terms of how you're hearing it. So instead of, I'm hearing the critic say, I'm a failure, by saying I'm a failure, you're internalizing that. So you need to rephrase it and say, I'm hearing the critic say, you are a failure. Again, reminding yourself that that critic is like a subpersonality talking to you, trying to convince you of something that is not true. So that's the first thing, making sure that you're saying, the voice is saying, you are this and you are that, not I am this and I am that. The second question is, what is this critic trying to protect me from? Because fundamentally, all of the critics, the protector, more so than others, but all of them are there to actually protect us and try and keep us safe because it's perceiving some kind of a threat of failure, a threat of things not working out, a threat of social rejection, a threat of what will they think? What if they don't like it? What if this? What if that? And once you're aware that the critic is trying to protect you from something, you then ask yourself, do I need to be protected? And that's step number 3. You're examining the evidence. Do I need to be protected here? What is actually going on? What is the worst case scenario? Because you're probably thinking about the worst case scenario. But in doing that, you're catastrophizing, which is a cognitive bias that we tend to do where we think about the worst case scenario. And then by thinking of the worst case scenario, we then try and avoid it. And so we don't take action. But it's very rare for the worst case scenario to actually occur. This is just something that we do, a negative thought process. So again, think about, okay, well, what is a more realistic appraisal of what could happen? Then step number 4, you actually break the cycle. So up to this point, you've been allowing your mind to just follow on where you are, but then it's really important to consciously break it. And what this means is consciously remind yourself of experiences you've had in the past where you have been successful, where you learned from a mistake, where you developed resilience, where you achieved something. So you're consciously taking your mind back to examples, real tangible examples of when you didn't crumble, to remind yourself that you've done it before and you can do it again. And then step number 5, you respond to that critic. So you respond to the critic. You can say, okay, I know you're there. I can hear you. I can see you. I know what you're trying to do, but I don't need you to protect me. I'm okay. I've got this. And you consciously come up with a more realistic appraisal. And I always encourage people to write this down. Write down a more realistic appraisal of what's happening, of what could happen, of their sense of confidence or conviction or the belief that they have capabilities they'll be able to rely on.
I love these tools that you're sharing. They're amazing.
They're so simple. They're actually so basic and intuitive. But we forget to apply sometimes the basic and the intuitive. And when you then start to realize that actually you can apply it in this basic framework, then you think, okay, well, I feel ready next time I'm faced with an inner critic. I know how I'm going to respond now.
And I'm guessing it's kind of like reinforcing your neural pathway. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Totally. And this is the thing. Sometimes what I find is when I've just taken someone through this, they say, I tried to apply it and there were lots of steps and then I got a bit confused. And then, we refresh it again. And then the next time they do it, they say, actually, it was much easier. I got to a later step and I found it came much more naturally to me. And then as they continue to go through, it just becomes quicker and quicker because to your point, again, you're creating those neural pathways.
Physically, actually.
Oh, yeah, completely. What is a thought? A thought is simply a pathway in the brain that gets activated through electromagnetic, impulses. And when you have a thought repeatedly, you learn it, it becomes a default way of thinking. Just like when you're memorizing someone's phone number. So in the same way, you're just leveraging those brain processes to actually benefit you in these moments. And I always find it's easier when you first start doing this stuff to write it down, to journal it. Because when you're doing that, you're also engaging, there's a physical component where you've got a pen in your hand and you're writing, but it also gives you additional mental clarity to be able to get things down. And when you go through that, it allows you to, again, reflect on it and review it at a later point in time, which again reinforces it. But the more you do it, you get better at doing it without needing the pen and paper. And you can actually do it in the moment without the additional, stimuli or medium. So that's basically it. So they're the critics that we find are the most common. The steps to go through, which again are not rocket science, but make a lot of sense to guide that kind of thought process, because it's a very compassionate approach.
One expression I've heard a lot is become your own best friend. And that's why it's good you bring about the word compassion, which I think maybe I would consider as a meta skill. It's even below all this process you just described in those techniques.
Yeah, I love that.
You've got to have compassion for yourself and for others before you can even start this.
Totally. I love the way you've just positioned that. It's almost like compassion is the soil upon which you're going to be planting the seeds to be able to, to allow the plant to grow and to bear fruit. And it's very contrary to often what we see on a lot of social media pages and a lot of these people in the industry of kind of personal development who will often say things. And I got called up on this recently. I put a post out and it was talking about, feel the fear and push through. I had this little anecdote and admittedly, I didn't think about it too much. And a lady wrote a comment so kindly and compassionately. And she said, while I know what you were trying to communicate, this is actually not a healthy approach, because when you're feeling the fear, your body is telling you something. And by pushing through, you're literally not being compassionate to the data that's being received, because emotion is data, right? It's like data that we are receiving, and we have to interpret that data and decide what to do with it. And so I kind of love that, because it made me realize that, we see a lot of these statements, just push through, crash through it.
Exactly. They're all around.
Everywhere. When you actually look at the research and the psychology components in terms of what needs to happen, and in order for it to be a lasting impact, we actually need to be far more compassionate than these motivational phrases may sometimes say and suggest.
But you're a speaker, and people on stage often are taught that. You're scared when you get on stage. You are going to be afraid just do it anyway, push through.
And it's I heard that early on when I was a speaker as well. And I had the best piece of advice that actually came to me from, I don't even remember where it came from. I wish I did, because if it was a person, I would have thanked them. They basically highlighted that, especially in the case of going on stage, the reason why we often feel anxious and nervous and fear is because there is a risk of social rejection. And like the example I shared before, when there is a risk of social rejection, social isolation, saying something wrong, we experience it as an emotional pain because it's activating these underlying neural pathways similar to when there's physical pain. So our body is designed to avoid that. And so our body is priming us to try and avoid that, fight or flight mechanism. But we know that in that state, it doesn't actually help us. And so this piece of advice I was given or read, or who knows, it was especially in the case of that, where it's, speaking in front of a group of people. Excitement and fear, when you look at it physiologically, so take away the emotion, take away your thoughts, what's going on in your body? Sweaty palms, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, maybe a little bit of tension. The physiological sensation is almost the same. And what we know from emotion is there are two components. There is arousal, where you will have certain hormones, neurotransmitters going around your body, and that leads to energy and physical sensation. And then the second part is a cognitive component, where the brain makes sense of what you're feeling based on what's happening in the environment. How can I make sense of this? Oh, you're about to go on stage. You are fearful. Oh, you're about to go on a roller coaster. You're excited. So there's this real kind of cognitive piece where the brain plays a big role in determining what we feel.
It reminds me of this anecdote from Tony Robbins, where he explains he was dealing with two different clients, big names in the USA, and one of them was this big actress who she became too afraid to perform. And she was explaining how she felt, and she's like, I don't know, I feel anxious, my hands start sweating, my heart starts beating, and I know I have to flee. And then he gets this other client, Bruce Springsteen, who explains how he feels before going on stage. He says, before going on stage, I start being anxious, my hands start sweating, my heart starts beating, and then I know I'm ready.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love it. I posted recently on a couple of my social platforms about how, I've spoken in front of audiences of thousands. I speak to, I do webinars for companies around the world. And yet still, before webinars, I will still get butterflies. And the post was talking about how so many people will interpret these butterflies as fear, anxiety, nerves. But actually, we get the butterflies because we care. And our body is giving us what we need to actually perform. But it requires us to make that connection and remind ourselves of that. Otherwise, we will think, oh no, butterflies, I'm fearful. I'm going to mess up. What if I fail? What will they think of me? As opposed to butterflies, I am ready. Let's do this. That's such a great story.
That interpretation part of the brain that you were talking about, where we get environment stimulus and feelings, and then we give it
meaning. And it's that actually, I love that, because it's true, we give it a meaning, and then that meaning also can tie into our bigger meaning for life. And if we have a bigger meaning for life, then even these little challenges that we have, we can almost feed it into what is that bigger picture. And we can say, okay, this challenge I'm having right now, it's going to make me stronger. It's going to give me experience. I'm learning new skills. And that is helping me achieve whatever that bigger purpose that I have is.
Awesome topics.
I know so much. There's so many things we could continue to explore and be here for days.
Yeah, I'm not going to keep you too long, but I do have a few more questions.
Go for it.
In terms of, again, to continue on that topic of purpose and meaning, when you help your people, mainly women, from what I understand, finding a journey, do those journeys resemble each other at all? Or is there common denominators between purposes and missions that make people feel excited and thriving in their life? Is there something in common?
Yeah, that's a really good question, which I hadn't really thought of before. I think, what they would have in common Because, I work with a lot of professionals, and sometimes I know when they're just telling me what they think I want to hear, or when they're actually sharing what they genuinely believe is their life purpose. And the thing that they have in common is that, when you ask this question of, let's say, project ahead to your last day alive, and you're looking back on your life, what would make you excited to have done? Or what legacy do you want to leave behind? And when they're excited by that, and again, it always has to do with other people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a lot of the people that I coach and the women that I work with, their mission is to inspire, to empower, to raise consciousness, to be a source of inspiration to others, right? To make a difference in the lives of others. I have others who have a much more kind of micro view where they say, I want to be a role model for my children, or I want to make my mother proud because of XYZ. And that's still beyond the self. So that is still personally motivating for them. So it really varies person to person, but the consistent element is that there is something beyond just them. Because also we know when we look at the definition of purpose from a psychology perspective, there's two components where the first is it has to be personally meaningful for them. So you can't ever go to someone and tell them what their purpose should be. It won't work that way. There has to be some kind of element of meaning in terms of someone's worldview. And the second element is that it's got to be beyond the self. And again, I mean, just highlighting, it doesn't even necessarily need to involve other people. I know some others whose sense of meaning is around environmental sustainability, leaving the planet in a better place.
Yep.
So there's lots of ways to look at it, but it's definitely something I always encourage people to do. And your sense of meaning can change throughout your life, depending on what you've experienced, what you've seen, what you're doing. And so it's a worthwhile practice to take time to reflect. The other mistake people make is they think that they will just be able to figure it out really quickly. They might allocate 20 minutes on a Saturday. I'm going to think about my why and I will know what it is. It doesn't necessarily work like that. It's a long evolving process.
But morph is like a feedback loop as well. You start doing something and then you get, this other idea, and then you try this and it's not fixed.
No.
I have two more questions for you. One of them is a much more down to earth one. In what you're doing, how do you help people not getting stuck in all the blockages that have to do with money, have to do with allowing yourself to earn money, or being afraid of losing money or not having money, all these things that people go through when they have to build an activity that generates income for their mission and life and purpose, but also the sustenance?
Yeah, this is a good one. And it's something that holds a lot of people back. Money mindset is something also that is impacted in the first couple of years of your life in terms of what you saw, what, the attitude your parents had towards money, whether you struggled early on or you didn't, these things have an impact on how you approach that in adulthood. A big part of it is, constantly reminding yourself of your higher purpose, this meaning that you have. And that can sometimes in itself just create a little bit of separation between the immediate fixation you may have now as opposed to then. Another great piece that I always focus on is, you've got either an abundance mindset or a lack mindset. If you're always focusing on what could go wrong and what's not right, you're going to be stuck in a state of lack, and it's going to hold you back. It's probably reflecting one of these inner critics coming in, trying to protect you. The flip is focusing on the abundance, that, being grateful for what you have, for your skills, for your strengths. I think a big piece when it comes to money decisions that I've always been that's always kind of guided me is I'm big on preparation. I wouldn't encourage, some people encourage others to, if you have a dream, just go out there and make it happen. I'm less that way inclined. I'm probably a little bit more on the, let's be prepared and make sure we can do that first. Have enough money to get you by 6 months, to be able to invest if you need to, inject capital, whatever it is, get some loans, but make sure you're able to service them. I'm always thinking in that way. How can you protect? But at the same time, taking educated risks is also important, and you learn. So long as it doesn't have the potential to negatively impact someone who is dependent on you. So if you have a child, if you have a family, and they're entirely reliant on you to survive in terms of roof over their head and food on the table, these are additional factors you need to consider. And it might be a matter of timing. It might be a matter of making some decisions in the current moment to give you more leeway in the future, to have a bit of extra liquid assets or whatever it might be. So they're kind of a couple of pointers when it comes to money. It's always tricky because it's always dependent on someone's risk tolerance, on someone's position, again, dependence on them, their mindset more broadly. So, this is not financial advice, but yeah, just some pointers, I think, for people to take time to really think about. The other quick one as well, when it comes to actually seeking advice from others, I learned this really early on. Seeking guidance from others is great. I think it's so good to get different perspectives. What you need to keep in mind, though, is someone who gives you advice is giving you advice based on what they would do if they were in your circumstances, based on their values, their beliefs, what they have been through, what their worldview is, not necessarily what you should do, because you are not them. So when you're listening to people's advice, remember they're sharing what they would do if they were you. They can sometimes be really persuasive because they're putting themselves in your shoes from their perspective, not necessarily where you're coming from. So I always say, take advice. Advice is like a gift. They'll give it to you. You choose what you do with it. Choose what's going to work for you. But being open to actually perspectives is really important. How did people navigate things in the past? What is their decision-making process? What values underpin their decisions? And that can help you gain clarity.
You get a lot
yourself.
of people who have trouble allowing themselves to earn money because they have this self-worth issue.
I just read something on this today that had been shared in my network, and it was from someone who is very, very, very spiritual and religious. But her premise was that, God has put me on this planet to make a difference and has given me talents and strengths so that I can succeed, to help me make a difference. And I loved the way that she'd positioned it, because if we have a bigger purpose that's beyond ourselves, we also need to think, okay, what do I have that allows me to create and to earn and to develop and to achieve, knowing that this is all helping me achieve that greater purpose, which is actually benefiting people other than me.
Right.
And so there's this piece around, a lot of people feel selfish when it comes to earning, or to your point, undeserving of money and wealth when it starts being generated. If it's driving an egotistical desire that you have, then it's probably not healthy. But if it's being earned in an honest, ethical way, you're doing the right things, think about it from the perspective of, how can this be a story that I share with others to inspire and empower them?
Love this last point.
And sometimes that's enough. Yeah, sometimes, honestly, that's enough for people to go, actually, yeah, it's not just about me. How can I use this as something that will be of benefit to others?
I'm going to ask you my last question, which is more about how to juggle the different things in your life, how to have a successful business and purpose and mission, something that you really have so much conviction for. And it takes a while in your life. It takes a large part of your life. You have a lot of commitment towards it. But in that journey, not let your family, relationships, and hobbies crumble.
I love this question to end on. And I love that it fits so perfectly into that PERMA model that I shared with you, because we know that these different pieces of the puzzle are really important too. And where one of them crumbles, you actually won't be able to achieve that full degree of happiness that you're seeking. So when it comes to balancing things, because we know that there are certain times in life where something may need to take precedence over something else because of a certain time. Let's say you've got young children, they may need to take precedence over your desire to set up a business or whatever that is. I think, again, this differs person to person based on what their values are, what's most important to them. But planning really helps. Scheduling, getting really clear on, okay, if I have however many waking hours in a day, depending on how many hours you sleep, how do I want to use that time to be connecting with my loved ones and the people I care about, to still be able to have that time to engage in things that I love and bring me joy. Interestingly, the two that drop off when people get stressed or when the pressure is on, relationships drop off because all of a sudden we feel like they're not important, and engagement, finding these things or making time for these things that bring us joy and connect us with that sense of flow. These two things drop off, but these two things are so important for general well-being, for psychological well-being. And if we don't have these, we can keep pushing and pushing and pushing in other areas, but we will always feel like we're lacking something. So, having that in mind is important. How do we get that balance? And just planning, constantly reevaluating, recalibrating, seeing what is working. One thing that I've learned during this lockdown period is I have rediscovered the importance of, I guess, self-care. Being in the lockdown period, a lot of people who are self-starters, who are highly motivated, were thinking, great, I'm just going to knuckle down and get as much done as I can. But, I'm sure many people could relate to that. And there was a lot of, again, discourse around, I saw one quote that was doing the rounds, and it said, if you get out of this lockdown period not having set up a business or read all the books you wanted to read or done all the renovations you said, then it's not time you lacked, it's discipline. And while on the one side, that's very motivating, on the other side, it is so disrespectful to the human experience, where everyone's experience is different. We can't generalize. Some people have children that they're trying to homeschool. Other people are dealing with mental health challenges, and then to tell them they lack discipline, it's just not the right way to do it. So one thing I've definitely learned during this time is a heightened appreciation for the fact that everyone has a unique experience. Everyone's journey is different. And so when it comes to you finding the right balance, you first need to be super clear on what is that bigger purpose that I have. That will be your North Star, your guiding light. And then you work out, what am I comfortable with doing? What are the essentials that I know from the research I need to maintain? What's the certain level of each of them that I'm going to be happy with? Because some people are more relational than others. Some people really thrive with, big groups of people. Others just like having one close friend or two close friends. So again, differs, but I think it's knowing that there's no right or wrong. It's just about continual evaluation and checking in with yourself. Because again, we get so fixed on, what am I achieving? Where am I going? How am I tracking? And is everyone else okay? We don't take that time to really look inwards and make sure we're giving ourselves what we need so we can be the best for every other element in our lives.
So staying aware of those different categories in our life so that we can maintain our own mental health. But I hear also some kind of organization allocating time slots really clearly and communicating that to others. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Right. Setting boundaries, healthy boundaries. People will appreciate knowing upfront what to expect. It's important in life, in our personal lives, whether we're employees, whether we're running our own businesses. And it's very good practice for us because it's about respecting our time.
Beautiful. This has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much, Shadé.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Oh, I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you for the opportunity. I genuinely hope that all your listeners are able to glean something new and fresh, or just have a reminder of something that they'd forgotten about.
Oh, they will, 100%. There's one thing we do at the end of each interview, though. And It's 60 seconds that are given to you to address yourself directly to listeners and send a message to the world, something you'd like everyone to know.
Oh, putting me on the spot. I could have come up with something amazing if I had more time to think about it.
I'm sure you're going to anyway.
I love this. Okay, 60 seconds. Okay, when does my time start?
Now.
Now. So the message that I want everyone to have is, we are all on our own individual journeys. And your journey differs to every single other person on this planet. And that means that you have your own challenges, your own struggles, your own obstacles. But what we know is that we are also connected to every other person on this planet because they're also going through their own challenges, their own obstacles, their own tests. And so in knowing that we have this common humanity, it gives us this extra compassion to everybody in the world and makes us feel connected, makes us feel grounded. At the same time, I want you to know that you are here for a reason, and you just need to get clear on what that reason is for you. What is going to resonate with you? What's going to give you the drive and the momentum and the motivation when you're feeling down? Because getting clarity on that, asking yourself deeply, what am I here to do? What is the point of all of this? This will absolutely fundamentally shift how you view your life and will ultimately shape what you end up doing from here onwards. So that's my message for you all.
Thank you so much.
That was fun.
If you want to hear more about Shadé, you head to www.shadezahrai.com. That's SHADEZAHRAI.com. And have a look at all the wonderful videos she's recorded.
Yeah, please check them out. We're on YouTube. We're on. You can connect on LinkedIn as well if you're there. TikTok if you're there. Who knew there was? We do a lot of coaching content on TikTok, confidence, career, professional development, and there's a big audience there. Instagram, Facebook, your favorite platform. Come and connect. I'd love to hear from you, hear what your thoughts were. And a big thank you to you, Cyprian, for the opportunity to share with your audience, share some insights and ways to really uplift their lives.
Thank you. What we do is offer solutions to problems, and that's exactly what you do.
Love it.
The Future Seeds podcast is a project that is supported by its community of listeners. If you like the show and what it stands for, I invite you to head to www.futureseeds.news, where you can support the show for just $2 a month, be part of the Future Seeds community, connect with its amazing members and speakers, and enable this podcast to thrive. I thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the show and its exploration of alternative solutions to the world's greatest challenges.